The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a great bowl carved from black stone. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in curved rows that rose up toward the domed ceiling. Their voices echoed and mixed together in a sound that reminded Ambassador Sarah Chen of angry insects. Sarah sat in the human section, which was small and placed far from the center. Around her, only 12 other humans represented all of Earth and its colonies. They were outnumbered by almost every other species in the chamber. The Zephyrians alone had over 200 representatives. The ancient hegemony had 300. "The motion is now before the council," announced Speaker Vorth, his blue skin shimmering under the chamber lights. "Resolution 2847X calls for the complete quarantine of the Sol system and mandatory behavioral correction of the human species." Sarah's hand stayed folded in her lap, but inside she felt a cold anger growing. She had seen this coming for weeks. The other species had been talking, making deals, building support for this moment. They thought humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too different. "The Zephyrian Republic supports this resolution," said Representative Klex, rising from his seat. His voice carried across the chamber through the translation system. "Humans have shown time and again that they cannot control their violent nature. They expand too fast. They take risks that endanger everyone." Sarah wanted to laugh. The Zephyrians had conquered half their sector of space in brutal wars. But when humans had defended themselves against pirates, suddenly they were the violent ones. "The Kelthani Trade Federation agrees," came another voice. "Human economic practices are chaotic and unpredictable. They refuse to follow established trade protocols. They make deals with species we have not approved." More voices joined in. The Threx Collective spoke about human individualism being dangerous to social order. The Mineral Lords complained that humans mined asteroids too efficiently. One by one, species that had benefited from human help and protection now voted to lock humanity away. Sarah touched the small device hidden in her sleeve. It looked like a simple data pad, but it contained information that would terrify every being in this chamber. Real numbers about human industrial capacity, true counts of human ships and weapons, data about technologies that humanity had developed in secret over the past 2 centuries. "The hegemony has watched younger species rise and fall for 10,000 years, spoke Elder Zeth, his ancient voice carrying the weight of authority. "We have seen species like humanity before. They burn bright and fast, then destroy themselves and others. It is better to contain them now before they cause greater harm." The vote began. Species after species pressed their voting crystals. Blue light meant support for the resolution. Red meant opposition. The chamber filled with blue light as the votes were counted. Sarah closed her eyes and remembered the message she had received just 3 hours ago. It had come through secret channels, encrypted so heavily that only a few humans in the galaxy could read it. The message was short. Kepler 442b colonies refused aid. 3 million dead. Council blocked relief ships. Time to show them who we really are. The colonies on Kepler 442b had been hit by a plague 2 weeks ago. The local species, the Karathi, had begged for help. Their own medicine could not stop the disease. Human doctors had a cure. They had faced similar plagues before. But when human relief ships arrived at the system, Council forces turned them away. "The matter requires further study," the Council had said. "Proper procedures must be followed." While they studied and debated, 3 million Karathi had died. Men, women, children, all dead because the Council was more concerned about human influence than Karathi lives. "The vote is complete," announced Speaker Vorth. "Resolution 2847X passes by a margin of 4,200 votes in favor, 800 opposed." Sarah stood up slowly. Around her, the other human representatives looked shocked and angry. Some were arguing with nearby aliens, their voices lost in the noise. But Sarah felt only a cold calm settling over her. She activated her communication device and sent a single coded message to Earth. "Gloves off." Across the chamber, she caught the eye of Calith Morin, the representative from Karathi space. He was one of the few who had voted against the resolution. His people owed their survival to human medical aid that had arrived months earlier, before the Council could stop it. He nodded to her slightly, understanding in his dark eyes. "Ambassador Chen," called Speaker Vorth. "Do you wish to make a statement before this session ends?" Sarah walked down to the speaker's platform in the center of the chamber. All conversation stopped as beings turned to watch her. She was small compared to most of the aliens around her, just a human woman in a simple blue uniform. To them, she must look helpless and defeated. "Honorable representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation system. "For 200 years, humanity has tried to be good neighbors in this galaxy. We have followed your rules. We have asked permission before we acted. We have shared our discoveries and helped when we could." She paused and looked around the chamber. Thousands of alien faces stared back at her, some smug, some curious, a few sympathetic. "We did this because we believed in the idea of a galactic community. We thought that different species could work together, learn from each other, and build something better than any of us could achieve alone." Sarah pulled out her datapad and held it up. "Today you have shown us that we were wrong. Today you have chosen fear over friendship. You have chosen control over cooperation." "Human," interrupted Representative Klex. "Your species is young and has much to learn about galactic civilization. This quarantine is for your own good as much as ours." Sarah smiled, and several aliens shifted uncomfortably. There was something in that smile that they had never seen from a human before. "You speak of civilization," she said. "Let me tell you about civilization. Civilization is not about following rules made by those in power. It is not about keeping others weak so you feel strong. Real civilization is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves." She gestured toward the Karathi section. "You let 3 million beings die rather than accept help from humans. You turned away our medical ships while children suffered from a plague we could have cured. That is not civilization. That is the behavior of bullies and cowards." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted at each other and at Sarah. Some demanded she be removed for insulting the council. Others called for immediate enforcement of the quarantine. But Sarah continued speaking, her voice somehow cutting through the noise. "You think you know humanity? You think we are just another young species that will bow to your will? You're about to learn how wrong you are." She turned and walked back toward the human section. As she passed the Karathi representative, she whispered quietly, "Tell your people to watch their skies tomorrow. They will see something beautiful." Sarah reached her seat and sat down calmly while chaos continued around her. Her datapad showed a single message in response to her earlier signal. "Orders received. Deployment begins in 12 hours. The council thought they had just caged a dangerous animal. They had no idea they had just awakened something far more dangerous. Human patience finally pushed beyond its limits. In hidden bases across the galaxy, ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers began to power up weapon systems. Space stations that looked like mining platforms started revealing their true nature, and in the depths of space, fleets that officially did not exist began moving toward their targets. The council had made their choice. Now they would live with the consequences. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood in the command center of Station Omega, buried deep in an asteroid field that officially did not exist. Around him, hundreds of officers worked at control stations that stretched across a chamber large enough to hold a city. Holographic displays showed star maps covering half the galaxy, with thousands of red dots marking human assets that the council had never detected. "Sir, we have confirmation from Ambassador Chen," reported Commander Lisa Park. The message was, "Gloves off." Marcus nodded grimly. He had been waiting for this moment for 30 years, ever since he first learned about the Shadowfleet project. For 2 centuries, humanity had been playing a careful game. They had shown the galaxy just enough of their capabilities to be useful, but never enough to be seen as a threat. That game was over now. "Send the signal to all units," Marcus ordered. "Operation Sunrise begins immediately. Phase 1 protocols are now active." Across human space, cargo ships that had been hauling goods between colonies suddenly began to change. Hull panels slid back to reveal weapon arrays that had been hidden for decades. What looked like simple freight containers detached from the ships and unfolded into fighter craft. The civilian vessels transformed into warships that could match anything in the council. Fleet's Captain Janet Morse watched from the bridge of the merchant vessel Golden Dawn as her ship completed its transformation. The bridge itself expanded as hidden sections extended outward. New control stations rose from the floor. The cargo bay doors opened to reveal launch tubes for a squadron of fighters. "All systems green, Captain," reported her tactical officer. "Weapons online, fighters ready for launch." Janet smiled. She had been pretending to haul grain and manufactured goods for 15 years. In reality, she commanded one of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Her crew had trained in secret, using simulators hidden in what everyone thought were cargo containers. "Set course for the Zephyrian border," she ordered. It's time to remind them that humans are not as helpless as we look. Similar scenes played out across hundreds of systems. Mining platforms and asteroid belts suddenly revealed themselves to be fortress stations bristling with weapons. Survey ships dropped their disguises and became fast attack craft. Even passenger liners transformed into carriers capable of launching entire fighter wings. But the ships were only part of humanity's secret. The real surprise was how long they had been preparing. On Earth, in the basement levels of the Global Defense Command, General Patricia Adams watched as screens showed the true scope of human industrial capacity. Factories that the Council thought produced consumer goods had been manufacturing military equipment for generations. Mining operations that seemed small and inefficient had been stockpiling resources for this moment. "Ma'am, we have reports coming in from all sectors," said Lieutenant Colonel James Wright. "Human assets are revealing themselves as planned. The Council forces are responding with confusion and panic." Patricia had helped design this strategy when she was just a young officer. The idea was simple but required incredible patience. If the galaxy saw humans as weak, let them believe it. Use that misconception as a shield while building real strength in secret. Every human colony had been carefully planned with hidden capabilities. What looked like simple residential areas concealed underground factories. Spaceports that seemed to handle only civilian traffic had secret military sections. Even the orbital elevators that lifted cargo from planetary surfaces doubled as launch systems for military satellites. "General, we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony homeworld," reported the communications officer. "It's interesting." The main screen flickered and showed Elder Zeth, the ancient Hegemony leader who had spoken in favor of the quarantine just hours earlier. His usual calm expression had been replaced by something that might have been fear. "General Adams," he said, his voice tight with control, "we need to discuss the situation that has developed. Our deep space monitors have detected unusual activity in your territory." Patricia smiled. The Hegemony prided themselves on having the best intelligence network in the galaxy. If they were calling, it meant they had finally realized how badly they had miscalculated. "Elder Zeth," she replied calmly, "I'm not sure what you mean. We're simply conducting some routine military exercises." "Routine exercises do not involve fleets of unknown warships appearing throughout human space," Zeth said. "Our analysts estimate you have revealed at least 3,000 vessels that were not in any of our intelligence reports." 3,000 was less than 10% of the real number. But Patricia didn't correct him. "Let them discover the truth slowly. Perhaps your intelligence reports were incomplete," she suggested. The truth was that human intelligence had been feeding false information to the Council for decades. Every spy network, every surveillance system, every source of information about humanity had been carefully managed. The Council saw only what humans wanted them to see. Meanwhile, human agents had infiltrated every major Council institution. They worked as translators, technicians, clerks, and advisors. Some had been in place for so long that they had children who were also agents, creating entire families dedicated to the long-term mission. Commander Sarah Kim sat in the Zephyrian Strategic Planning Center, where she had worked as a cultural liaison for 8 years. Her real job was to monitor Zephyrian military capabilities and report back to human intelligence. Today, she watched with satisfaction as Zephyrian officers scrambled to understand how their primitive human neighbors had suddenly become a major threat. Commander Kim called General Voss, her Zephyrian supervisor. "You're human. Can you explain what your people are doing?" Sarah pretended to look puzzled as she studied the tactical displays. "I'm not sure, General. These ships don't match any designs I'm familiar with. Perhaps they're new prototypes." She didn't mention that she had helped design some of those ships herself, or that the communication codes the Zephyrians were trying to break had been written by her team. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as human agents maintained their cover, while secretly helping coordinate the revelation of human strength. Council forces found their communications intercepted, their movements tracked, and their strategic plans somehow known to human commanders before they were even finalized. The scope of human preparation went beyond just military assets. Human traders had been mapping every jump route, cataloging every resource deposit, and charting every inhabited system for 2 centuries. They knew the galaxy better than most Council species knew their own territories. Human scientists had been studying alien technologies, not just to learn from them, but to improve upon them. Many of the innovations that Council species thought were their own discoveries had actually been human developments, shared selectively to maintain the illusion of technological dependence. Dr. Michael Chen worked in a research facility hidden inside what appeared to be a mundane asteroid mining operation. His team had been reverse engineering and improving alien technology for 30 years. The quantum computers that powered Council ships used human-designed processors. The energy shields that protected Council stations were based on human innovations. "Doctor, we're getting reports that our technology reveals are proceeding as planned," reported his assistant. "Council forces are discovering that many of their systems have hidden backdoors." Michael nodded. It had taken decades to subtly introduce human improvements into alien technology. The Council had been grateful for the help, never realizing they were accepting Trojan horses that could be activated when needed. The most shocking revelation was still to come. As Council forces scrambled to respond to the sudden appearance of human military assets, they began to discover just how deeply human influence had penetrated their society. Economic networks that seemed to be controlled by various alien species were actually human operations. Trade routes that the Council thought they managed had been subtly guided by human agents for generations. Even the political alliances between different species had been influenced by careful human manipulation. Admiral Rodriguez watched the reports flowing in from across the galaxy. In less than 12 hours, humanity had revealed that they were not the junior species everyone thought they were. They were potentially the strongest single power in the galaxy, and they had been hiding in plain sight for 2 centuries. "Sir," reported Commander Park, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different Council fleets. They're asking for negotiations." Marcus considered this. The point was not to destroy the Council, but to make them understand that humanity would no longer accept being treated as inferiors. "Send a reply," he said. "Tell them that humanity is willing to discuss a new arrangement, but it will be as equals, not as subjects of their quarantine." The galaxy was about to learn a new truth. Humans were not the dangerous young species that needed to be controlled. They were the patient observers who had been quietly taking notes while everyone else played their games of power, and their patience had finally run out. The Zephyrian enforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, with all the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Admiral Krev had led similar operations dozens of times over his long career. Young species always resisted at first, but they learned quickly when faced with superior firepower. "Deploy standard formation," he ordered from the bridge of his flagship. "Begin scanning for human defensive positions." The fleet consisted of 200 warships, including 12 heavy dreadnoughts that could crack planets. It was massive overkill for dealing with humans, but the Council wanted to make a statement. Any species watching would see what happened to those who defied galactic order. "Sir," reported his sensor officer, "I'm not detecting any human ships in the outer system. Readings show normal civilian traffic around the gas giants." Krev nodded with satisfaction. The humans were probably hiding behind their homeworld like frightened children. This would be easier than expected. "Advance to Mars orbit," he commanded. "Transmit the standard surrender demand." The fleet moved deeper into the Sol system, passing the asteroid belt without incident. Earth hung before them like a blue marble, seemingly defenseless. A few orbital stations were visible, along with the usual traffic of cargo ships and passenger vessels. "Admiral," came a new voice over the communication system. It was calm, polite, and completely human. "This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Sol Defense Force. You are entering restricted space. Please reverse course immediately." Krev activated his response channel. "Human Admiral, you are speaking to Admiral Krev of the Galactic Council Enforcement Fleet. Your system is under quarantine by order of Resolution 2847X. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Admiral Mitchell replied. "You have exactly 1 minute to begin your withdrawal before we consider you a hostile force." Several of Krev's officers made sounds that might have been laughter. The audacity of these humans was almost admirable. They were outnumbered and outgunned, yet they were making demands. "Humans, you have 60 ships at most," Krev responded. "We have 200. Your technology is generations behind ours. Stand down now and your defeat will be quick and merciful." 30 seconds, came the calm reply. Krev was about to respond when his tactical officer spoke up. "Sir, I'm reading some unusual energy signatures. There seems to be something wrong with the sensor data." What do you mean wrong? The readings don't make sense. I'm showing massive power sources, but there's nothing visible on optical scans. 15 seconds, Admiral Mitchell announced. Krev was growing annoyed. Fire a warning shot at their nearest orbital station. Show them we mean business. His weapons officer targeted one of the smaller human stations and fired a plasma beam. The energy blast that could destroy a small warship struck the station's shields and simply disappeared. The station didn't even flicker. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, voice tight with worry. "Something is happening. I'm reading massive power spikes throughout the system." Space around the Zephyrian fleet began to shimmer. What had looked like empty void suddenly filled with structures that hadn't been there moments before. Orbital defense platforms materialized as their cloaking fields dropped. Each one was larger than a Zephyrian dreadnought and bristled with weapons that made the enforcement fleet's artillery look like toys. "Time's up," Admiral Mitchell announced. The platforms opened fire, but not with the intent to destroy. Instead, they used precise energy beams to disable the enforcement fleet's engines and weapons. Zephyrian ships found themselves helpless, drifting in space with dead systems. But the platforms were just the beginning. Between Earth and Mars, a massive structure uncloaked itself. It was a fortress station so large it could have housed 1 million people. Defense grids that had been invisible moments before lit up throughout the system, creating a web of firepower that could have held off 1,000 ships. "Impossible," Krev whispered. "Where did all this come from?" His communications officer was frantically working at his station. "Sir, I'm receiving data streams from our disabled ships. Our computers are being accessed by something. The humans are downloading our entire database." Admiral Mitchell's voice came over the channel again. "Admiral Krev, welcome to the Sol Defense Grid. What you're seeing is the result of 200 years of careful preparation. Every asteroid in this system has been hollowed out and turned into a weapons platform. Every moon has defensive installations. Even the space dust has been weaponized with nanoscale defensive systems." Krev stared at the tactical display in horror. The readings showed thousands of defensive positions throughout the Sol system. It wasn't just defended, it was a fortress that made every other system in the galaxy look defenseless. "Your ships are intact but disabled," Admiral Mitchell continued. "Consider yourselves our guests while we discuss the new political situation. Oh, and Admiral, you might want to check with your homeworld. They're probably experiencing some technical difficulties right about now." Back in Zephyrian space, chaos was erupting across their entire military network. Ships that had been in routine patrol found their systems failing. Communication networks that had operated flawlessly for decades suddenly went dark. Supply depots reported that their automated systems were malfunctioning. General Voss stood in the Zephyrian Strategic Command Center, watching as report after report of system failures poured in. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our networks are secure. They're protected by the best encryption in the galaxy." Commander Sarah Kim, still maintaining her cover as a cultural liaison, pretended to study the displays with concern. She didn't mention that these secure Zephyrian networks had been running on human-designed quantum processors for over 20 years, or that every piece of encryption software contained backdoors that human intelligence could activate at will. "General," reported a technician, "we're receiving a transmission from an unknown source. It's coming through our own communication network, but we can't trace the origin." The main screen activated to show a human woman in a military uniform. She appeared to be sitting in a command center that was far more advanced than anything in Zephyrian space. "General Voss," she said, reading from a data pad. "This is Admiral Chen of Human Intelligence Operations. We regret the inconvenience, but your military systems are currently under our control. This is a temporary measure to prevent any unfortunate misunderstandings while our governments discuss the current situation." Voss felt his legs go weak. "How did you access our networks?" "General, did you really think we spent 2 centuries in this galaxy without learning how your technology works? Every processor in your fleet, every communication relay, every defensive system contains components that we designed. We've been watching, listening, and learning from the beginning." Similar scenes were playing out across Council space. Species that had voted for the human quarantine found themselves cut off from their own military networks. Ships that tried to approach human systems discovered that their engines would mysteriously fail just outside weapons range. The Kelthany Trade Federation watched in shock as their economic networks revealed that many of their most profitable trade routes were actually managed by human operators. Transactions that they thought they controlled had been subtly guided by human agents for generations. The ancient hegemony faced perhaps the biggest shock of all. Their vast archives of knowledge, accumulated over 10,000 years of galactic dominance, showed signs of careful editing. Data that they had relied on for centuries contained subtle modifications that painted humanity in a more primitive light than the truth. Elder Zeth sat in his private chamber, reviewing reports that made no sense. According to their records, humans had developed faster than light travel only 200 years ago. But the technology they were displaying suggested they had been working with FTL concepts for much longer. How long have they been manipulating our information? He wondered aloud. His aide, a young hegemony scholar named Korth, consulted his datapad. Sir, our preliminary analysis suggests the modifications go back almost to first contact. It's possible that nearly everything we think we know about human capabilities has been carefully managed. The revelation was staggering. The hegemony prided themselves on their knowledge and wisdom. The idea that a young species had been feeding them false information for 2 centuries was almost impossible to accept. But the evidence was overwhelming. Across the galaxy, human assets were revealing themselves with perfect coordination. Communication networks that should have been impossible to access were under human control. Technologies that the Council had considered their own were showing human design elements. Admiral Rodriguez watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. The first phase of Operation Sunrise was complete. Council forces had learned that humanity was not the weak species they had believed. Now it was time for the second phase. Send the message to all human units, he ordered. Begin Phase 2. Show them that we haven't just been hiding our strength. We've been everywhere all along. Throughout Council space, humans who had lived and worked alongside alien species for generations began to reveal their true purposes. The quiet technician who maintained the Threx Collective's computer systems was actually a human intelligence officer, the elderly Johnny. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the institution's 3,000-year history. Representatives who had been calm and confident just days earlier now sat in their chambers with expressions of shock, fear, and growing understanding of how completely they had been outmaneuvered. Speaker Vorth's blue skin had turned a pale shade that indicated extreme stress among his species. Around him, the great chamber buzzed with urgent conversations in dozens of languages as representatives tried to understand how the galaxy had changed overnight. Order, Vorth called, his voice echoing through the chamber. We must have order to address this crisis. Representative Klex of the Zephyrian Republic stood up, his usual arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like panic. Speaker Vorth, our entire fleet has been disabled. Our military networks are under foreign control. This is an act of war, is it? Came a calm voice from the human section. Ambassador Sarah Chen rose from her seat, looking exactly as composed as she had during the quarantine vote. According to our records, the Council declared war on humanity first when you voted to quarantine our system and impose behavioral correction on our species. That was not a declaration of war, protested Elder Zeth. It was a legal resolution, passed by proper procedures. Sarah smiled. And again, several representatives shifted uncomfortably. Legal according to whose law? We never agreed to Council authority over human space. We participated in this body as a courtesy, not as subjects. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. It showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with thousands of points of light indicating human presence. The display was staggering. There were human assets in virtually every major system. For 2 centuries we have been building a parallel civilization alongside yours, Sarah explained. Every major trade route has human ships. Every important system has human observers. Every significant political development has been monitored by human intelligence. The map zoomed in to show specific sectors. In Zephyrian space, the lights revealed human agents embedded in their military, their government, and their research institutions. The Kelthani Federation showed similar penetration of their economic networks. Even the ancient hegemony showed signs of human influence reaching back generations. Impossible, whispered Representative Mech of the Threx Collective. Our security screening would have detected foreign agents. Your security screening was designed by humans, Sarah replied matter-of-factly. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who developed your biometric identification systems 30 years ago, is sitting in the third row of your delegation. She's been reporting to human intelligence the entire time. A Threx delegate in the mentioned row stood up slowly. She was a middle-aged human woman who had worked with the collective for decades, helping them improve their technology and social systems. Now she nodded politely to the shocked representatives around her. "The collective gave me citizenship and treated me as family," Dr. Walsh said. "I genuinely care about your people. That's why I made sure your security systems were effective against real threats while creating exceptions for human intelligence operations." Similar revelations were occurring throughout the chamber. Humans who had lived and worked among alien species for decades were identifying themselves. The scale of the infiltration was breathtaking, but so was the realization that these agents had consistently worked to help, rather than harm their host societies. "Dr. Marcus Volkov," Sarah continued, pointing to a human in the Kelthani section, "revolutionized your agricultural systems and helped feed billions of your people. He also ensured that your food distribution networks could be shut down peacefully if needed. Rather than causing starvation, Engineer Lisa Park," she indicated another human, "designed the safety systems for your fusion reactors that prevented 3 major accidents. Those same systems allow us to safely disable your power grids without causing catastrophic failures." The pattern became clear as more examples were revealed. Human agents hadn't just infiltrated council societies. They had improved them while building in safeguards that could be activated when necessary. Representative Thorax of the Mineral Lords stood up, his rocky features twisted with confusion. "Why? Why help us while preparing to control us?" "Because we hoped it wouldn't be necessary," Sarah replied. "We wanted to be part of a galactic community based on cooperation and mutual respect. We prepared for the possibility that we might be rejected, but we always hoped for acceptance." She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed economic data flowing between systems. "Look at the trade networks you think you control. Human influence has been making them more efficient for generations. We've prevented economic crashes, improved resource distribution, and helped stabilize currencies." The data was undeniable. Human economic agents had been subtly guiding galactic trade to prevent the kind of devastating crashes that had plagued earlier civilizations. Wars had been prevented by human diplomats working behind the scenes. Technological advances had been shared to prevent dangerous disparities between species. Elder Zeth spoke up, his ancient voice heavy with the weight of realization. "You've been managing us. For 2 centuries you've been treating us like children who needed guidance." "No," Sarah said firmly. "We've been trying to be good neighbors to people who insisted on seeing us as dangerous outsiders. Every time we revealed a new capability, you became more suspicious. Every time we helped solve a problem, you worried about our motives. So we learned to help from the shadows." The holographic display changed to show military assets. The revelation here was even more shocking. Human ships had been present at every major conflict in recent history, usually disguised as civilian vessels or operating under false registrations. "The Zephyrian-Karathi border war 15 years ago," Sarah explained. "Human ships intervened to prevent the use of planet-killing weapons. You thought it was equipment failure." "The Threx Collective's civil war," she continued. "Human agents provided intelligence that allowed the moderate faction to win quickly, preventing millions of deaths. The Kelthani pirate crisis. Human fleet units eliminated the pirate bases while making it look like internal Kelthani operations. Representative after representative realized that conflicts they thought they had resolved themselves had actually been managed by human intervention. Wars had been shortened, atrocities prevented, and disasters averted by a species they had considered too primitive to matter. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Sarah activated a new display that showed technological development across the galaxy over the past 2 centuries. "Your quantum computers," she said, "run on processors designed by human engineers. Your medical scanners use human-developed algorithms. Your faster-than-light communications rely on human improvements to your original technology." The chamber fell silent as representatives realized the implications. Technologies they had developed and were proud of were actually human innovations, carefully introduced to maintain the illusion of independent progress. "The fusion reactors that power your worlds," Sarah continued, "are 30% more efficient than your original designs because human scientists improve them. The agricultural systems that feed your populations use human biotechnology. Even the translation systems that allow us to communicate were enhanced by human linguists. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood up in the hegemony section. She was elderly, with gray hair and kind eyes, and had served as a historical advisor to the hegemony for over 40 years. I helped compile your historical databases, she said to Elder Seth. Much of what you believe about ancient galactic history comes from human research. We filled in gaps in your records, corrected errors, and provided context you had lost over the millennia. Elder Zeth looked as if he had been struck. The hegemony's greatest pride was their vast knowledge of galactic history. Learning that much of it had been provided by humans was almost unbearable. Why? He asked. Why share so much knowledge with us if you were planning to do this?
Because we weren't planning this, Sarah replied.
We were planning for it, but we hoped it would never be necessary. Every technology we shared, every improvement we made, every crisis we helped resolve, we did it because we wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves. She paused and looked around the chamber. But you made it clear yesterday that you will never accept us as equals. You voted to quarantine us, to impose behavioral correction on our species. You treated us like dangerous animals that needed to be caged. So now you're showing us the cage was an illusion, said Representative Klex, his voice bitter. Now we're showing you that we've been choosing to respect your authority out of courtesy, not necessity, Sarah corrected. The cage was never real. We could have left any time we wanted. We could have ignored your laws and done whatever we pleased. Instead, we chose to follow your rules and work within your systems. And now? Asked Speaker Vorth. Now we're done being treated as inferiors by people we've been protecting and helping for 2 centuries, Sarah said. The quarantine is unacceptable. The idea of behavioral correction is insulting. You will withdraw both order. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had been reconfigured. Where once thousands of representatives had sat in curved rows that emphasized the hierarchy of galactic civilization, now there were simple tables arranged in a circle. The message was clear. There would be no more elevated positions, no more species claiming authority over others. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the circle, but she was no longer alone. Beside her stood Admiral Rodriguez, General Adams, and a dozen other humans who had revealed themselves as key figures in humanity's hidden infrastructure. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was negotiating as equals. The alien representatives who remained looked very different from the confident leaders who had voted for human quarantine just a week earlier. Many seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the revelation of how completely they had misunderstood the galaxy's true power structure. Before we begin, Sarah announced, let me make our position clear. The quarantine resolution is void. The concept of behavioral correction for any species is rejected. The old council's claim of authority over human space is terminated. Representative Klex started to protest. You cannot simply ignore legal decisions made by proper galactic authority. Legal according to whom? Admiral Rodriguez interrupted. Show me the treaty where humanity agreed to council jurisdiction over our internal affairs. Show me the document where we surrendered our sovereignty to this body. Klex opened and closed his mouth like a fish. The truth was that humanity had never formally submitted to council authority. They had participated as observers and trading partners, but they had never surrendered the right to govern themselves. The council represents the established order of galactic civilization, Elder Zeth said, his ancient voice carrying less authority than usual. It has maintained peace and stability for 3,000 years. Peace for whom? Asked General Adams. She activated a holographic display that showed conflict zones throughout recent galactic history. Your peace has been built on keeping younger species weak and dependent. You've prevented them from developing their full potential to maintain your own dominance. The display showed dozens of examples. Promising civilizations that had been guided into economic dependence, species whose technological development had been restricted for safety reasons, and worlds whose natural resources had been claimed by council members under various legal pretexts. We've watched you do this for 2 centuries, General Adams continued. Every time a species showed independence or innovation, you found ways to control them. The quarantine resolution wasn't about human aggression, it was about human success. Sarah stepped forward. But we're not here to destroy the council or punish anyone. We're here to offer a better way forward. She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show a new star map. This one highlighted trade routes, research collaborations, and peaceful contact zones that had flourished under human influence. For 2 centuries, we've been quietly building a different kind of galactic community, she explained, one based on voluntary cooperation rather than imposed hierarchy. One where species help each other reach their potential instead of keeping each other weak. The map showed remarkable results. Systems under human influence had seen dramatic improvements in living standards, technological development, and peaceful resolution of conflicts. Species that had been struggling under council oversight had thrived when given real support, instead of patronizing management. Representative Morin of the Karathi stood up slowly. His people had been among the few to vote against the quarantine, and they had good reason to trust humanity. Ambassador Chen, he said, my people owe their survival to human assistance. When the plague struck our colonies, council forces turned away your medical ships, but somehow human doctors reached us anyway. 3 million of my people are alive because humans ignored council orders to help us. Sarah nodded. Dr. William Chang and his team used smuggling routes to reach your colonies. They worked for 2 weeks straight to synthesize and distribute the cure. They saved your people because it was the right thing to do, regardless of council politics. Other representatives began to speak up. The delegate from Proxima Station, a small human-built research facility, described how human scientists had freely shared discoveries that other species kept secret. A representative from the Titan Mining Collective explained how human engineers had helped them develop safer extraction methods after a series of accidents. But not everyone was ready to accept the new reality. Representative Thorix of the Mineral Lords slammed his rocky fist on the table. This is all manipulation, he declared. You helped people to create debts of gratitude. You shared technology to make us dependent on you. Everything you did was calculated to give you leverage for this moment. Sarah looked at him with genuine sadness. Representative Thorix, 3 years ago, when the mining accident on Series 4 trapped 200 of your workers, who organized the rescue operation? Our own emergency services, led by engineer Patricia Santos, a human who had been working in your systems for 15 years, Sarah interrupted. She could have let your people handle it alone and avoid revealing her capabilities. Instead, she coordinated a rescue that saved lives. She turned to address the entire assembly. Yes, we were prepared for this confrontation. Yes, we built influence networks and developed contingency plans. But every single action we took could have been purely selfish. We could have used our knowledge to exploit rather than help. We could have stayed hidden and let you struggle with problems we could solve. Admiral Rodriguez stepped forward. The difference between us and the old council system is simple. You maintained power by keeping others weak. We built influence by making others stronger. The holographic display changed again, showing comparative development statistics. Species that had worked closely with humans showed dramatic improvements in almost every measure of civilization. Longer lifespans, better education, more efficient resource use, and lower conflict rates. This is the choice before you, Sarah said. You can continue trying to maintain the old system of hierarchy and control. But that system depended on information and resource scarcity that no longer exists. Or you can join us in building something better. Elder Zeth leaned forward, his ancient features creased with thought. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah smiled, and for the first time it was warm rather than threatening. Partnership. Real partnership between equals. No more council claiming authority over sovereign species. No more artificial restrictions on technological development. No more economic exploitation disguised as guidance, she gestured to her colleagues. Humanity will share our real technology with any species that wants to work with us. Medical advances that could extend lifespans by centuries. Energy systems that could power entire civilizations cleanly. Manufacturing techniques that could eliminate scarcity. And in return? Asked Representative Kleck suspiciously. Nothing, Admiral Rodriguez replied. That's the point. We don't want tribute or submission. We want partners in exploring the galaxy and building better civilizations. But, General Adams added, species that continue trying to dominate or exploit others will find themselves isolated. We're done tolerating bullies, whether they're council members or anyone else. The chamber fell silent as representatives absorbed this. Several delegate groups began urgent whispered conferences. The implications were staggering. Humanity was offering to freely share technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization, asking for nothing but cooperation in return. Representative Morin stood up again. The Karathi accept your offer of partnership, he said formally. We have seen human character under pressure and we trust your intentions. One by one, other representatives began to speak. Smaller species that had been marginalized under the old council system were quick to accept partnership with humanity. They had seen the benefits of human cooperation and understood that this was their chance to achieve true independence. But the major powers hesitated. The Zephyrian Republic, the Kelthani Federation, and the Mineral Lords had built their influence on the old system. Accepting human partnership would mean giving up their privileged positions. What about the hegemony? Sarah asked Elder Zeth directly. You pride yourselves on wisdom accumulated over millennia. Surely you can see that cooperation serves everyone better than domination. Elder Zeth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of genuine reflection. You have shown us that our wisdom was incomplete. We believed ourselves to be the teachers, but we failed to learn from our students. He stood slowly, his ancient frame moving with dignity, despite his people's reduced circumstances. The hegemony accepts partnership with humanity. We offer our historical knowledge and cultural experience in exchange for the chance to learn from your example. The Zephyrians and Kelthani held out longer, but eventually they too accepted partnership agreements. The alternative, isolation in a galaxy, increasingly organized around human-led cooperation, was too costly to contemplate. Only the Mineral Lords and a few other holdout species refused the partnership offers. They retreated to their core systems, maintaining the old hierarchical structure among themselves while finding themselves increasingly irrelevant to galactic affairs.